On Christmas morning, 2023, the mountain town of Frost Hollow, Colorado, woke up to a silence so deep it felt unnatural. Snow had blanketed the roads overnight, muffling every sound. Christmas lights still blinked faintly on porches, and smoke curled lazily from chimneys. It was supposed to be a morning of peace, family, and warmth. But inside one small house at the edge of town, something unthinkable had happened. At 6:12 a.m., a 911 call came in from a neighbor named Harold Pike. He reported hearing 3 sharp cracks echoing through the cold air. Like fireworks, but meaner, he said. When deputies arrived at the Rowan residence 10 minutes later, they found the front door wide open and a trail of boot prints disappearing into the snow. Inside, 48-year-old Michael Rowan lay dead in his recliner. 2 gunshot wounds to the chest and 1 to the neck. His cocoa mug was still steaming beside him. The Christmas lights flickered weakly, casting red and green glows across the blood-stained carpet. It looked like he had been sitting there, quietly, waiting for morning before someone he knew or trusted pulled the trigger. In the kitchen, his wife, 45-year-old Linda Rowan, was found unconscious on the floor. Her wrists were bruised, and a chair lay toppled beside her. She was breathing, barely. Paramedics rushed.
On Christmas morning, 2023, the mountain town of Frost Hollow, Colorado, woke up to a silence so deep it felt unnatural. Snow had blanketed the roads overnight, muffling every sound. Christmas lights still blinked faintly on porches, and smoke curled lazily from chimneys. It was supposed to be a morning of peace, family, and warmth. But inside one small house at the edge of town, something unthinkable had happened. At 6:12 a.m., a 911 call came in from a neighbor named Harold Pike. He reported hearing 3 sharp cracks echoing through the cold air like fireworks, but meaner, he said. When deputies arrived at the Rowan residence 10 minutes later, they found the front door wide open and a trail of boot prints disappearing into the snow. Inside, 48-year-old Michael Rowan lay dead in his recliner. 2 gunshot wounds to the chest and 1 to the neck. His cocoa mug was still steaming beside him. The Christmas lights flickered weakly, casting red and green glows across the blood-stained carpet. It looked like he had been sitting there quietly, waiting for morning, before someone he knew or trusted pulled the trigger. In the kitchen, his wife, 45-year-old Linda Rowan, was found unconscious on the floor. Her wrists were bruised, and a chair lay toppled beside her. She was breathing, barely. Paramedics rushed her to Billings Mercy Hospital while investigators began to search the house. The only person missing was their 17-year-old son, Ethan. His room was neat, bed made, computer on sleep mode. But the rifle case in the garage was empty, and his boots were gone. Outside, the snow showed one set of footprints leading away from the back door, straight toward the tree line behind the property. And then, nothing. Detective Avery Collins, a seasoned investigator who had seen her share of domestic tragedies, felt something different about this case from the start. She said it didn't feel like a break-in. It felt like a story that had been building for a long time and finally cracked. Linda woke up in the hospital around 8:40 a.m. that morning. Her voice was hoarse when she spoke to detectives. She said she'd gone to bed around midnight after watching It's a Wonderful Life with Michael and Ethan. She remembered hearing noises, maybe glass breaking, then waking up on the kitchen floor unable to move. She claimed her last memory was of her husband sitting near the tree. She said, "He looked so peaceful, until I saw the blood." She swore she didn't know where Ethan was. She said, "He'd never hurt anyone. He's a good boy." But something didn't sit right. There was no forced entry, no sign of robbery, no missing valuables except the rifle. The kitchen window Linda claimed the intruder had entered through had been opened from the inside, and the bindings on her wrists were too loose to be convincing. In Ethan's room, officers found something else. On his nightstand lay a torn page from a notebook. It read, "The house is colder every day. Sometimes I think the cold comes from us." At first, it seemed like poetic teenage sadness, but when detectives checked his laptop, they found a digital journal filled with darker thoughts. He wrote about his parents' constant arguing, his father's temper, and a truth too heavy for Christmas. 2 days later, Frost Hollow's sense of safety shattered completely. A neighbor's doorbell camera, reviewed by detectives, showed a hooded figure walking down the Rowans' driveway at exactly 4:03 a.m. The person carried a long object, a rifle. The face was hidden, but the height, build, and gait matched Ethan's. At 4:09, 3 bright flashes lit the living room window. Muzzle fire. After that, no one came or went.
The search for Ethan became statewide news. Police drones scanned the forests, volunteers combed the mountain trails, and news vans parked outside the family home. Reporters described the Rowans as ordinary, a quiet family, churchgoers, always polite. Michael was a retired forest ranger, Linda worked part-time as a substitute teacher, and Ethan, classmates said, was shy but kind. He used to draw a lot, one of his teachers told a local station. Always mountains, snow, and trees, never people. But Detective Collins had seen enough ordinary families to know how little that word could mean. 5 days after the shooting, a snowplow driver spotted tire tracks leading off a service road deep into the national forest. At the end of the trail stood an old ranger cabin, half buried in snow. Inside, officers found signs of life: an extinguished campfire, 2 cans of beans, a half-empty water jug, and a Remington .30-06 rifle leaning against the wall. On the cabin table, a note had been stabbed into the wood with a hunting knife. It said, "I told him what he did. I couldn't unhear it. I wish I could." There was no sign of Ethan. Detective Collins began digging through old case files from Michael's years as a ranger. That's when she found something, a buried story from 2006. Michael had been involved in a hunting accident that killed a 19-year-old volunteer ranger named Connor Hayes. The case had been closed as accidental discharge, but the victim's parents had always protested, insisting Michael had been drinking and that their son's death had never been properly investigated. Linda Rowan, then Linda Pierce, had been the key witness. She testified that Michael wasn't drinking, that Connor's death was a freak misfire. 6 months later, she and Michael were married. Collins couldn't shake the feeling that this was the truth Ethan mentioned in his journals, and that Christmas Eve might have been when Michael finally confessed. On December 28th, the sheriff held a press conference. Snow fell steadily as he spoke, his breath visible in the cold. He said, "We believe Ethan Rowan is armed and dangerous and may be suffering from extreme emotional distress." The town of Frost Hollow split overnight. Half saw Ethan as a murderer. The other half believed he was a victim, a kid who learned something he couldn't live with. On January 4th, hikers found a frozen body near the riverbank, less than a mile from the cabin. It was Ethan. He had been dead for several days. The medical examiner determined the cause of death, a single gunshot wound to the head. The rifle was lying beside him. At first glance, it looked like suicide, but Detective Collins didn't believe it. The gun was wiped clean, too clean, and there were 2 sets of footprints leading to the site, one matching Ethan's and one smaller, lighter, possibly a woman's. When confronted with this evidence, Linda Rowan broke. She sobbed, shaking, and whispered, "I said he was going to tell the police. He said he'd ruin everything. I just wanted him to stop." She claimed they met in the woods, that she only wanted to talk him out of confessing. "He pointed the gun at himself, and I tried to take it away. It went off." But the forensics told a colder truth. The muzzle imprint on Ethan's temple didn't match the gun's angle if he'd been holding it. It was fired from nearly 2 feet away. The final piece fell into place when investigators found gunshot residue on Linda's gloves, the same pair she had worn that morning when searching the woods with police. Linda Rowan was arrested and charged with second-degree murder and obstruction of justice. She pleaded not guilty. In her only interview from jail, she told a reporter, "You can't understand what it's like to lose both of them. Michael wasn't who I thought he was. Ethan wasn't either. They both wanted to destroy what we built. I did what I had to do." Today, the Rowan house still stands at the edge of Frost Hollow, a fading green 2-story with Christmas lights frozen to the gutters. No one lives there anymore. The windows remain boarded, but on winter nights, neighbors swear they still see a faint glow from the tree in the living room. Some say it's just reflection from passing cars. Others say it's something else. The memory of a family that froze long before the snow fell. If you've watched this far, thank you for joining us on this journey into the cold heart of Frost Hollow. Stories like this remind us that sometimes the scariest monsters are the ones sitting beside the Christmas tree. Don't forget to subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. Until next time, stay warm and stay safe.